I look forward to that. Now, it's not often on Remember When we cover Aboriginal issues, but I have a fascinating story about the Bush Queen and the Aboriginal chief. And this, John, is the real-life story of Scottish aristocrat Anne Fraser-Bonne and the Aboriginal chief William Barrack, and their close friendship and the battle for native rights. And we're speaking tonight to the great-great-granddaughter of Anne Fraser-Bonne, and this is Serena Wells. Good evening, Serena.
Good evening, both of you. How are you, Brady?
Oh, it's so nice to talk to you.
That's good. I'm glad you enjoyed what I sent you.
Yes, well, you know, I have been fascinated by this, and I just want you to explain, if you can, the relationship between the Bush Queen and the Aboriginal chief, and who they were.
Well, it's rather a long story. It's John Bonne. He was born 1805, and Anne Bonne was, his wife was born in Scotland in 1838. But it's a lovely love story on their part alone before you go into the Indigenous side of it all. As you read, it really is a lovely love story, that side. But she was on a spiritual level with Chief William Barrack, and they lived at Wappen Station. That's up near Mansfield. John had at least 30,000 acres there from the government for £10 a year, and then on he managed to purchase it. And Anne fought for their rights. She just couldn't stand seeing them. She employed nobody else except Aborigines at Wappen, the station. And also at that time, the Chinese had gone up to the gold mines. And she had those Chinese cooking in the kitchen, Chinese gardeners. And when she met William Barrack and his wife Lizzie, they had something in common. Anne had just lost her firstborn, and so had William Barrack. And they were able to sit round the campfire and listen to their story.
Serena, have we lost you?
Are you there, Serena?
Oh, what a shame.
Oh, what a shame. I was just getting into the story there. Anyway,
Pete will call her back.
All right, okay.
She's out of town and the line has just dropped off, sadly. Maybe her battery's gone flat.
Well, and of course, Anne Fraser-Bonne, who was born in 1838 and lived till 1936, so she was a fair age, Phil.
Yes, she was.
Champion of Aboriginal rights, and she was an aristocrat born to a life of privilege in the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah, and in fact, Serena can tell us more. You're back online, Serena.
Sorry, we lost you there, Serena.
That's all right. Oh, she certainly was born to a life of privilege in Scotland. I mean, considering there's 30 years difference in age between them. But John didn't want to marry Anne. He wanted to marry her mother back in Scotland. That's how it all started. John had a farm back in Scotland, and he leased this big exclusive property, and he sold merchandise at the local markets in Dunning, Perthshire, and that's where he met Mary, and he wanted to marry her. And of course the recession in Scotland came along, and John just lost every penny, and he had to walk off his land. So he went down to a local hotel, well, those days the pub, to get a job, and he met the syndicate, which was Lady Hastings, Lord and Lady Hastings, Watson and Hunter, and they had then released him land in Melbourne. So they persuaded him to get on the boat and come to Melbourne to get away from his debts. That's how it happened.
That was probably, John, about the same time as the potato famine in Ireland, which killed 2 million people.
That's right. Not many people know about that, and that's exactly right.
Now, how did she come across William Barrack, the painter?
When the painter, they met. John and Anne when they came out here to live. Back at Wappen Homestead, Barrack and his wife Lizzie had come down, and he was William Barrack of the Yarra tribe, Wingie tribe, and they had just met on the property. John always had about 500 to 600 Aborigines camped around the site. He befriended the Aborigines. He thought they were just wonderful workers. He hired them as shearers and gardeners and the rest, and they met, and Anne and Chief Barrack became very friendly because they lost their babies about the same time. Yes. And then Anne just started to see that they weren't getting the rights. It was Corranderk, that's the Aboriginal reserve there, that was about to be closed. And Anne just couldn't, just fought for all their rights. She just couldn't understand why the government didn't want to help them. After all, she said, They were citizens of Australia, just like we are. Why should we do what we were doing to them?
Well, and also they got here first, didn't they?
That's and a very
exactly right.
a very progressive attitude, may I say, back in those days, Serena. Now, I believe William Barrick, he was a very talented painter, wasn't he?
Oh, he was extremely talented painter,
Yeah.
yes. She managed to purchase 3 of his paintings, which she left in a will to different organisations. But she just said that when they were treated, they didn't get the rights. They were, when an Aboriginal was taken ill, he was sent to a hospital where he wanted to die back with his family. He wasn't allowed to. He was buried in a pauper's grave. And she just couldn't understand all that. And she just fought for their rights right up until the day she died.
Now, Serena, have you had much interest in turning this into, well, some sort of an historical piece? I mean, you have any approaches from...
Oh, yes, we had an approach. We've been looking around to do a film and perhaps a TV series, because it's a lovely, lovely story on both sides. On both sides.
I mean, you talk about how the Aboriginals of Victoria were mistreated, but I mean it was much worse in Tasmania, where they were virtually wiped out.
Oh, yes, I know that, yes.
They were driven into the sea, almost.
And yes, that's true, but Barrick was just a distant bystander when Blackman arrived. And he managed to get a boomerang, which we're still trying to trace. We think it's somewhere on the peninsula.
Oh, yes.
So, Blackman, when Blackman was here, that's what happened then. But Chief Barrick did a lot. See, don't forget, he was the chief, and all his offsiders and friends would come to him to get asked for rights, and he would go to Anne saying, well, this has been done, how can we fix this? And then she went on to go on to the Board of Protection for Aborigines. She was the first woman on that.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it. The board didn't like her because she's a prolific letter writer and a verse writer.
And I believe Barrick had a lot of tragedy in his life, apart from losing one of his sons to consumption.
One
Would
of
that be
his
right?
sons, yes. Well, Anne had a property home down in Kew, and he...
Which street in Kew? I might know the area.
Charles Street, Kew.
I know it well. It's where Trinity Grammar and Xavier are.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, well, he bought, when Anne spent the last years at the Windsor Hotel, 6 years at the Windsor Hotel, and she bought the house long before that, and she had that not as a reserve for Aborigines, but she had them camped on a veranda, and she was helping them because they had tuberculosis as rage in those days.
Yes, there's all sorts of sicknesses,
He brought his son David down for her help, him to go into a hospital, and the hospital wouldn't accept him, so he walked further to Kew and got her, and she demanded he went in, but unfortunately he died.
And a little bit later on, I believe Barrick badly burnt his hands. And,
yes, he did. In the last years of his life, he fell on the fire and burnt his hands, and she helped not nurse him back, but she was beside him trying to encourage him to paint again, which he didn't.
You know, there are so many aspects here which would be wonderful on the big screen. Aspects we haven't touched tonight, where Anne berates the Premier in his office, the John Blackman Treaty Ceremony, the tribal wars that were going on at the time.
Oh, yeah, and you just think that when John arrived here in Australia, he first went to Williamstown and Keilor, and there wasn't a house or anything there. It was just bare land.
Yeah. This sounds like a great project for someone like Channel 31, not Channel 30, SBS, Phil.
Yes,
absolutely, and I recommend
it is a lovely story. It's a lovely story from both sides.
Well, I mean, and you'd start back with Anne's homestead in Scotland, which would be like Downton Abbey, perhaps, you know.
Yes, that's true.
I highly recommend you make contact, perhaps, with the South Australian Film Commission,
we did that, yes.
or Film Victoria. They might offer you a grant, Serena.
Yes, we did that. We're in the process of doing that right now.
Well, the door to success is marked push, Serena. So
you never know.
Exactly right.
Don't know what's going on.
And you know, it's such a vast story. It really would.
It's a story that's got to be told, not only our side, from the Indigenous side as well.
Sure. I know, but you know, I think of the American series Roots, and I think that this has the makings of a television miniseries spread over perhaps 6 or 8 hours, rather than all be told in a 2-hour feature-length movie.
Well, you can't tell it in 2 hours or 5 minutes.
No, you couldn't.
way.
Exactly.
You couldn't do it justice, Serena. But
It's got to be history.
absolutely. Well, best of luck with it, and
Thank you very
we're
much.
very
Thank
happy
you.
to give you a little bit of publicity here on our humble little show on here on Sunday
I'm not
night.
humble at all, don't worry. I listen every day, all day.
And thank you for staying back. I think you were going to go away this weekend,
Yes,
but
we were, but don't worry.
you kindly stayed back for the interview, and we appreciate that.
That's all right. Thank you very much for having me.
And as I say, the connection is that Serena Wells is the great-great-granddaughter of Anne Fraser Bond. A fascinating story, John, and someday let's hope that it's projected on the screen.
Absolutely. Thanks for talking with us tonight, Serena.
That's all right. Good evening. Have all the best.
Bye-bye.
Good night.